Awesome. All right. Thanks, Val. And it's just a pleasure to be here presenting to Metagov. I wanted to talk a bit about what we see as some specific needs for distributed research. In my world, a lot of what we see is, and in the research world, a lot of what we see is that individuals need to have some kind of credential to be able to access facilities, to be able to access data, to be able to access even publications. So what we're trying to do is figure out how can we create a way to enable researchers to be able to move around from affiliation to affiliation, or even to be independent. Myself, I'm an independent researcher, and I find it's very, very difficult to be able to access a facility because I don't have the weight of a large university behind my name. So how can we create ways for researchers to get identity credentials and enable them to really participate in research around the world? So what we're doing at VeriMe is saying, look, there's got to be a way to do this separate from the standard institutional credential that you get because you have an institutional email that is, I don't know, yale.edu or whatever it happens to be. So what VeriMe does is it says we can provide researchers, individuals that identify as researchers, with a secure digital identity that enables verified access in a way that does not expose personal data, right? So we also very much care about privacy and security. So how can we provide essentially zero knowledge proof identity credentials for researchers? And at the same time, as we were thinking about doing this, we said, well, should we do this as a nonprofit? Should we do this as a corporation? What is the governance structure for ensuring that researchers that are creating and storing identity credentials on our service to ensure that those researchers have a say, both in the product itself, as well as in the organization, right? How is the organization governed? What is the budget? As well as, can this organization be acquired? And if so, what is the process for ensuring that the acquisition doesn't actually follows and continue, if there's an acquisition, which we're not planning for, but again, that there's a say by the people using the platform in any kind of acquisition play. We've built into the bylaws, making it very, very difficult for the founders, including myself, to take this as we're going to create this thing and then sell it. It's very, very difficult for us to sell this. It requires a pretty strong vote of the members. And the way the bylaws are written, it also says, look, you have to keep following the same privacy practices that we have at our organization with the data, right? So, so all of this is to underline the importance of individuals having a say and control over their identity, defining which pieces of that credential that they're going to make available. So the way we've set this up, and I probably should switch over to my other slide. So let's see if this works. You guys can see this, right? So the way we've done this, there's a free account and there's a member account. And as a free account, you can verify your to actually have a visible account and be able to share your credential. You have to verify your email, link to at least one external account. That could be OrcID, it could be another email address. You have to secure your account with multi-factor authentication as well. And you can also then set your data sharing controls. So each one of these, you can say, what do you want to share? What do you not want to share? And what is shared is yes, no, right? So do you have an account? Yes, no. Has your account, and if you have an account, it means you verified your email, you've linked to OrcID, you've secured it with MFA, right? That's what it means to have an account. But you can decide if you want to share that or not, right? And if you share it, it's a yes, no. If you become a member, you can then also participate in governance and also verify your identity with additional level of assurance using government documents. And also you can verify your personhood. So again, it depends on what your use case is, how you would interact with VeriMe. But again, trying to make it really clear that when you move to that higher level of privacy needs, that's when you become a member and have a say in the governance of the organization. So this is the core aspect of what VeriMe is free member account and the features of both of those. And we're a startup, so I'm just on a slide, it shows you where we are in terms of the build. And we've basically got everything set up in the build. except for the integration with the payment system that would take the payment when you become a member. Everything else is working. So I did want to go back. Any questions or comments right now? I'm trying to be mindful of time. Yeah.
Lori, can you say more about the data sharing controls? Like what kinds of data are you thinking about there?
Yeah. So in terms of data sharing controls, and I realized this morning, I'm like, I really need a screenshot. We have a video, but I don't want to show a video. So the data sharing is, so for any account, there is a kind of a hierarchy of data that you can share. So for the free account, for example, would be, you can share yes or no, I have an account. And when an external system would then query VeriMe, if you have, you won't be visible as having an account unless you go through the verifying email, linking to OrcID, and the MFA step. So once you've done those three things, you have an account at VeriMe. And then you can decide, do I or do not want to share that I have an account here? So that's the level you can share it at. We will not share any specific information other than your OrcID ID. Otherwise, it's a yes, no. And then on the member side, once you become a member, we're still working out exactly what we're going to share, but basically, like, is a member? Yes, no, right? Have you verified your documents? Yes, no. We're not going to be collecting information on your address. We're not going to be collecting information on or storing specific information on address or location. What we really, or we're using a third-party service for this. So all of that is going to be managed by them. And what we'll get is the proof that, hey, the documents have been presented, they've been verified by that third-party service. And we can say with assurance that you've presented these documents and the documents have been verified. And the same thing with proof of personhood. So it's always yes and no's. And then as the individual, you can say, do I do or not want to share that level of information? Do I want to share that I've approved my documents have been verified, et cetera. So that's the level that you'll be able to approve it at. But we're not going to be doing this atomic, my address is blah, 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 or I'm in this country, or this is my date of birth. No. Well, you don't even want to have that information in our system. And part of what we're going through now is what is the information that we absolutely need to manage the service. And this is where some interesting impacts of choosing to be a co-op come in. So for example, in a co-op, one person, one vote, right? So you can't have more than one account at VeriMe, because if you have more than one account at VeriMe, you have more than one vote, then you're going against co-op principles, right? So we have to be really careful that we make sure that we're doing a very, as good a job as we can at ensuring people don't have more than one account, and that we have alerts saying, hey, we think you have another account, and that we prevent people from creating a second account. So there may be certain piece of information that we collect as part of that deduplication or prevention of second account creation, but that's not information that we would share externally. So that would all be kind of part of that piece of it. So things like, do we need date of birth? Do we need other pieces? I don't know. We're still figuring out exactly what we need, but that's absolutely not something we would share externally to the platform. So, yeah.
Question, and apologies if I'm jumping ahead a little and you'll get to this, but I'm wondering about, like, if a purpose is to get independent researchers like access to research databases that they might currently need, like university emails for, whatever, like what's the process for getting I guess like VeriMe, like like the co-op, the credentials for those bigger sites to give all VeriMe users permission? Like, is there a kind of like negotiation that has to happen between VeriMe Co-op and archive.org or whoever else? Like, how does that work? Or these universities, like, how does it work?
Yeah, really good question. And we actually are just off a call with a potential launch partner. And these are some questions we were asking them. And one of the things we're looking at is because each one of the services that the researcher wants to gain access to is going to have a different, is going to likely have a different set of information that they need for the researchers to present in an identity proof for that researcher to gain access, right? It's not going to be one size fits all. And so you're right, there's going to have to be a kind of navigation negotiation between VeriMe and these requesting organizations for what information needs to be returned in the API payload. So we have APIs, we'll be working with them. We're going to be testing this out. We're in the process of identifying something like 5 to 7 launch partners so that we can have a wide enough range of kind of initial understanding of what needs to be in that API payload and how customized that needs to be, and how we can ensure that there's enough customization possible. And again, without releasing specific PII to the requesting party. And that's the dance that when we've done the technical piece and proof of concept that says this is possible to build and it's possible to build and scale. And we're really happy with the privacy component of this. And we're actually just in the process of finalizing our privacy policy. So that's all there. But yeah, the next step is working with those entities that researchers might want access to. And what would be really helpful for me is, and for our team, is if there are specific organizations that you guys would like us to be interacting with, please let me know or help make an introduction. And we're more than happy to reach out to them and see if they might be interested in being a launch partner. Yeah, Steve.
Now, one thing you could do for deduplication is do deduplication by social network. In other words, different people with the same name know different people with different names. So this is exactly the work that has been presented here by such as a Brad. What's Brad's last name? I forget Brad's last name, but in any case, it's this idea of, a human authentication network. So, just by, in other words, instead of me just submitting that my email, and then you verify by sending me an email, you verify by asking other people in the network if they know me at that email address. And if people testify they know me at that email address, that makes me different than the other Steve Vitkas in the world.
Right. Yeah,
You don't have to collect any personal information that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the challenge for us is the level of verification that is required by the requesting parties. And one of the things that we're hearing from the requesting parties is that, for most people, I think what you're talking about would work. I think for some people, and this is at the end of the day, we're solving a problem, usually for this long tail, is it a short tail? I don't know. Group of people that are not good actors, which is how can we ensure for the vast majority of researchers, they can gain access to systems, because there's a small component of people that are not doing the right thing. And so I think, I don't think there's a single answer, Steve. And I think that the human verification is valuable. I think right now, to build.
It was just an idea. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Part is having the actual credentials that says I'm a human and I am who I say I am. Using my own credentials is going to be where we're starting. And I think also doing the human verification system also requires that I have the email addresses of all of your colleagues and can contact them. And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to try to solve for every single use case, right? So I think right now we're doing the document credentials, and I'd be more than happy to talk with Brad about what he's doing and how they're getting the information for that. Oh, we have another person who joined us.
Could you give me a little bit more background on how the process works and what particular data set you're trying to get available to researchers?
Yeah, so it's not just one data set. It would be, hey, researcher X wants to go work at one of the Department of Energy labs, like, Oak Ridge, or they want to work at the Stanford Linear Accelerator. And right now that there's individual process for each one of these organizations that a researcher has to go through. And so if I want to go to Oak Ridge, I have to verify my identity with Oak Ridge before I can even, request access to their equipment. Same thing with Stanford Linear Accelerator. So each one of them has their own process. And each country, sometimes there's a national level process for gaining access to systems. There are different verification processes at some journals for authors, peer reviewers, and editors. There's also different access systems for access to certain kinds of data sets, right? Not all data sets require access, but some do, because they're specialized data sets that require you to prove who you say you are and also prove you're a researcher with the necessary skills and training to be using those data sets, right? So what we're trying to do is we can't solve all of those use cases, but what we can do is provide a one place for researchers to go, right, that validates they are who they say they are, and that they are a person, right? They're, you know, human, that can be added on to additional credentials like I am a researcher, right? That means that I don't have to share my identity documents with everybody I want to
Yeah, I
interact.
understand the digital identity part of it very well. I just
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
know who you were accessing. And now I
Yes,
understand that better. It's not just
all-
data.
no,
Okay.
no, it's not just data sets. It's pretty much any
Any
research.
research tool, any sort of resource. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And we're trying to make, you know, easier for, well, to reduce the likelihood of data breaches, right? Because you're sharing your data all these different places. And to reduce the challenge for all of those requesting entities, because they're holding all that data. That's a big mess, right? That's not a mess, but it's a lot to have everyone have to manage that level of PII. And I think also to solve some of the challenges that people like me that are independent researchers and don't have the account at pick a university, you know, I encounter all kinds of trouble because I don't have that university credential that generally, you know, kind of stands in place of I am who I say I am in the research community. So can we find a way to enable people to kind of carry their credential with them across their entire career instead of losing it every time you move from one place to the other? And any of you who are, you know, researchers know that every time you move, you have to go through the whole reputation management process again and prove your identity. So what we're trying to do is help researchers kind of carry that identity piece with them as they move around and not have to recertify that with every single requesting party and at every stage in their career. And from a governance perspective, again, coming back to that kind of decentralized component of this enables researchers to own your own identity instead of relying on these other parties to verify that you are who you know, to tell you are who you say you are, which always seemed very kind of ridiculous to me. It's like, why am I letting them say that I am who I say I am? I should be able to say that, right? So this is, I'm hoping, will become something that is valuable in this community, you know, of people who think that as individuals we can form communities, but we don't have to be reliant on external parties to assert. It is us who should be doing the asserting. Yeah. So I think the other piece I wanted to just mention on here, we have our principles listed here, and of course, as a co-op, we adopt and subscribe to the International Co-op Alliance principles, as well as an infrastructure, we also subscribe to the principles of open scholarly infrastructure. So transparent governance, living will. I talked about the whole piece before about, look, acquisition is really not in our cards because of the way we've set this up. We have purpose consistent revenue generation, and we also have open documentation of policies and processes. So again, part of that open documentation is that we have all of our governance documents on our webpage, right? I know when we were trying to start up this as a co-op, there was really nothing else out there in this space about people doing research, anything that are doing a co-op. So, and I know there's other co-ops out there, but a lot of them are agriculture, food co-ops, you know, local community co-ops. And so it was a bit of a struggle trying to figure out, you know, which legal representation should we use? What does the structure look like? If you're anticipating a membership of upwards of 10,000 to 1 million, how do you do voting? How do you set quorum? Right? There's lots of these questions and not a whole lot of answers. At least evident. And that's why I'm like, Val was like, oh, I wish I'd been in Metagov before because I could have put this on Slack and go, has anyone else solved this problem? But what we have here, we have our code of conduct, we have our articles of incorporation, our bylaws are up here, and our membership agreement for the people using the platform is also posted here on the website. I would encourage you to take a look. If you have comments or suggestions, please send them on. This is a really great time to provide us comments on this. But yeah, all this stuff is here. And then we also have our values on this page as well as our contact. So there's more on this website, but that's really just what I wanted to share. And I actually, will just put out there, has anyone else been, and Val, maybe for you, in terms of building governance, you've got 1,500 people on Metagov. Have you encountered anyone who's been working with voting structures other than DAOs? Maybe it's just DAOs for large groups of people, right? Over 10,000 people. And how do you deal with quorum in large groups of people?
Yeah, I mean, we don't vote in Metagov. There's no current voting structure for our community. We're not, besides for just like fun governance experiments, we're not really engaging in governance of Metagov. Uh, we do fun experiments, but in terms of actually like governing ourselves, I would say we are, yeah, non-structured in that way. But I don't know. I mean, we've done a lot of we're very closely connected with the sociocracy community, and have like all, I mean, many of us have been in lots of sort of sociocratically governed communities and things. So thinking about, I mean, my go-to is always like the kind of like working groups or circles of like expertise and interest. And I'm happy to, you might know a lot about the circles model and sociocracy as kind of the basic structure of it, but like there are smaller circles and then the circles are kind of nested, and decisions are made about certain things based on those different circles that are separated by expertise and interest. And then there's a kind of like cross circle process that also happens so that other circles are informing each other of the decisions. So yeah, things like this, and mostly everything is like consent based. So they have a term that I love that's, or not a term, but like a philosophy of like safe enough to try, good enough for now, safe enough to try. So thinking about like how uh, a group could come to a conclusion of come to a shared proposal for a action item that is like not necessarily everyone's first choice, but something that no one is like directly opposed to. So lowering the bar in terms of like consent and consensus.
Yeah.
I would say, since this is the International Year of Cooperatives, there's a lot of accessible information about comparative across different areas of the world. And in particular, I think there's been some nice resources recently on cross comparisons between Emilia-Romagna, Italy, and the Mondragon Basque Country scale. So both of those are very large scale cooperative systems and have wrestled with all these kinds of things and are, have a mode of experimentation. So Mondragon is currently wrestling and trying some ideas around how to split well instead of just getting bigger. So we'll see how that turns out for them. And I think everybody is, they're fully instrumented to study their process as they do it.
Well, thanks for that.
There's also been a lot of, I guess, technical tools around this, many of which haven't been integrated into a working system completely, I'd say. Decidem is probably one of the closest that was built specifically for the Basque region. And, I'm not sure where they are with that right now. So, well, in general, people tend to struggle to maintain some of the tech tools at scale.
Interesting. Yeah, that was one of the things so was it Decidem?
Decidem,
Decidem.
it was first built for budgetary reasons, I think, in Barcelona a long time ago now. And ran into all of those usual problems. about, trying to keep track of a really large community. I posted the one innovation that I've seen in this area. It's a startup called Social Roots, where they tried to think about, okay, we all know that if stuff like campaigns or regions or large sets of cooperatives or whatever it is you're doing gets large, you have trouble. And so they tried to sort of rethink how to build something that will address that need. So I think it's all a work in progress right now as far as addressing the scale.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm finally looking at the meeting chat. Sorry, guys. Social Roots. I like that. Awesome. Okay. Thank you for doing this item. I see it. Val, I see you had something in here about portable credentials. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what this is, mobile credentials. That's what VeriMe does. It provides a mobile credential. And we're actually right now in the process of investigating different, and I'm going to use this word, which has multiple meanings, but looking at using a wallet structure to be able to share those credentials. Whether that wallet is Web3 or not Web3, I think we could probably do both. And that would enable individuals to really easily share their credentials across a number of platforms. So again, depending on what different entities are requesting in the credential is going to be, I think, the trick if we're going to be using things like wallet structures, because once it's in the wallet, it's in the wallet. And I'm not quite sure how you interact with it other than there's a credential, yes, no. But yes, definitely portable credentials. And I do know about the Opolis Co-op, actually. I met them at ETH Denver like 3 years ago, I think it was, and they're awesome. I really, really like what they're doing. So yeah, I was thinking about the other day, like, I have to come up with benefits coverage for staff. Maybe I should just use Opolis. Social
Yeah,
Roots.
I'm a member of the cooperative and it's great. It makes me just think about like how yeah, I don't know, like I guess I'm noticing a trend, like all these cooperatives popping up and that they're catering to independent researchers, which I'm a part of that community as well. So I'm loving this. And I guess like I'm wondering like if and how many of them will kind of like compete with each other almost, like what happens then? Um
Yeah, and it's one of these. So when you look at the principles, right? One of them is that, cooperation among cooperatives, right? And I think that, and I just the call Ellie and I around just before this was, when we're talking about open science, there's, I think as scientists and researchers, we're kind of nurtured, brought up, whatever, conditioned into this idea that we're constantly collaborating and competing at the same time. And you have to almost break yourself of this habit of feeling like there's a zero-sum game when it comes to science, because there isn't, right? There are ideas, and you're supposed to share your ideas and bring forth your evidence and have an open discussion about, hey, does this work and where do we go next? And maybe there's 2 or 3 different paths, but it's not winner take all. It shouldn't be that way. And I think it's the same way, Val, with co-ops this is a way to say we all own this platform, and how can we work together to nurture and grow it, both in terms of what are those product features that are most valuable to you, but also who needs to be on the board and helping to make decisions for the strategy and furtherance of the organization, right? So yeah, I'm hoping this doesn't go down the path of competition. It shouldn't, because that's one of the principles of cooperatives. But I do think we need to be mindful of it. And if Ronan were still on the call, he'd probably make a mention of work that he and a colleague are doing on kind of creating something like, it's not Metagov, but it reminds me of what you guys are doing, which is a kind of a community home for cooperatives. So it's like a cooperative of cooperatives, which you see in like Mondragon as well, right? Where you have the overarching thing, and then there's little shops inside of that all work together through kind of the back office of Mondragon, right? And I think that's something we could potentially do, is think about, what are those services that, for example, VeriMe specifically provides, and are there things that we can use I was going to say parent, but to use a kind of an overarching cooperative to provide some of the back office services, so that as individual co-ops, we can continue to innovate and not have to innovate in places we don't have to innovate, right? So if we could kind of parse out everyone's secret sauce and work together, that might be a way to do it. And if we do share some of the back office and kind of infrastructural components of our infrastructure, which is funny, then maybe that's a way for us to continue to communicate with each other about what we're doing and say, hey, we're already doing that. You don't need to do that. You can use our service, and you guys are doing this new thing and we'd love to use your service. Maybe that's a way we can continue to communicate effectively.
Yeah, now I'm super curious about how Mondragon does it. I need to do some research into it just because, yeah, like I love the idea of like a co-op, I don't know, like castle soup, like some kind of like uh yeah, way that there's this big one and then there's a bunch of mini ones and they fit together, or then like how two co-ops might like merge or something, or an acquisition. There's lots of interesting stuff there, and I'm actually working on a project that is also, I think, going to end up being a co-op for artists and freelancers. It's kind of like the goal is to enable them to like save money and kind of like invest in each other's projects. So we're calling it like a savings club or an investment club. But uh yeah, I don't know. There's like lots of questions, but that's one service that, independents, especially in the US, we don't have access to like traditional employment sponsored retirement savings or any kind of like uh uh, benefits. So we're trying to kind of DIY a benefits co-op, which is kind of why I know about Opolis and have been like talking with them as well. But I think the ID piece is kind of like a key piece. So I would love to, I'm going to be thinking about this, and I would love to talk more
Yeah,
about
no, and we're doing these launch partner things now. So if there's some entity that we could be working with, that again, that you could recommend, we're more than happy to give them a call and see if this makes sense, and if like Opolis would want to build in I'm just throwing this out there as a, whatever, as a piece of what they're offering, we could work with them on this. Again, the question for us always comes back to, is the user group that we're targeting researchers, right? Is that makes sense in whatever entity that we'd be working with as a partner? There's many, many, many places in the world where identity verification is important, but the use cases have different meaning. Like an OrcID makes no sense outside of the research community. So why would we require somebody to get an OrcID ID, right? So that's why we want to make sure that we stay true to the particular community that we're serving. But there's no reason. But anyway, so I think that would be our main thing, is making sure that we're aligned, continue to be our mission and purpose.
So this is all about OrcID IDs.
No, it's not all about OrcID IDs. So, I mean, the reason OrcID is mentioned is because it's one of the ways researchers self-identify. They go get an OrcID ID, and it's kind of like, hey, this is my ID. I use it when I publish. So that's why it's there. When we talk about connecting with an external account, you can connect with your OrcID ID, you can connect with additional email addresses. But one of the ways that it has become accepted over the last 10 years for a researcher to say they're a researcher is by having an OrcID ID and having that record be associated with various aspects of what they've been doing, whether it's a publication or a peer review or an affiliation or things like that. So that's why we mentioned OrcID IDs, but we are not directly affiliated with OrcID. We are an independent organization. Yeah.
But you would expect people who are coming to your site to sign up, one of their main motivations will be to get an OrcID ID.
I don't know if it's a motivation to get an ID. I would say that signing up on our site, there should be a motivation to then go get an OrcID ID, but I don't think I think most people coming should already have one. Right. And OrcID IDs are free, open identifiers. It's a way to, add extra metadata to a record that indicates this person is active in the research community. Yeah.
I'm wondering about the expansion and what you're thinking of moving forward with this. I think one of the things that Liz and I have been talking about, and a couple of other people have been talking about, is so in one of the working groups that's happening in Metagov, it's the focus is on like creating the controls for how do we share our data and how do we have really granular control over this data. And there's like step one, which is like, all right, build a terms of service that includes that, because none of them do. Most of the terms of service are just like, we're taking your data, bet, right?
Right.
And then the second iteration of this is like, what is the actual interface? Like how do you make that feasible? And the like next steps and like question mark around this is very much like, all right, like you need an identity in order to be able to like control granularly what data you have. And so I think we've been articulating it almost as a data wallet of like, you have a wallet with all of your data, and then now you can share it or not share it with different organizations. And I think this has also been coming into conversation with like, for example, like researchers who are very invested in DEI. And now a lot of their work won't be funded going forward, even if they like change the words, quote unquote, because like they historically are associated with this information. So I'm wondering what you're thinking of, like, is VeriMe very, very constrained in terms of like, you're just like, we're trying to get access to different repositories? Or is there kind of this understanding of like data and like the way OrcID associates all of your records with your identity? Is this a more reliable way to do that and also have people control that information?
Right. So I would say, just to make it, so OrcID already exists. We're not trying to replace OrcID. I want to make that very, very clear. OrcID is a reputational system. It allows you to kind of create a relationship using your identifier with the things you produce. Right? I'm like, and that identifier is supposed to be embedded in the thing that you produce, so that as it travels around and is shared in the internet, you can say, this is part of what I produce this thing, whether it's you and a bunch of co-authors or just you. This is a data set I contributed to, because the ID should be part of the metadata on that data set. So that's OrcID, right? What the challenge is, right, it has been all along, is how do I also prove that I am me? Right? The OrcID ID is just an ID that I've registered for, but there's no proof in that registration that I am who I say I am. Right? It can be potentially accreted over time as I use my ID for authoring and peer reviewing and all of the other things that I do, right? But there is no specific identity proof in an OrcID. So what we're doing is saying, look, OrcID is awesome. It's a way to have an identifier, not identifier that you can use as you travel around and produce various things. But what we're providing is actually an identity proof that says, I am who I say I am a person. That is not accomplished through OrcID. And so this can be very, very helpful in any kind of workflow where you need to prove who you are. Right. So that would be like access to a data set that has specific access rights. Might be, hey, you need to have this credential as a first step for requesting access to this data set or this data repository or this data archive or this facility or this whatever, right? So that's what we're trying to do, is provide that additional level of actual identity verification, so that as you come to that entity, whether it's a data set or an actual bricks and mortar building, that you have that ability to share your actual proven identity with that facility to gain credentials to access it. So I'd say for your use case, Ellie, when you're thinking about how do you share, there's actually really great work that the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health is doing on access to medical data sets, right? And they've been looking at what are those credentials that need to be provided, by who needs to verify it, and what different kinds of credentials or pieces of information are required by different kinds of data sets. And so they've generally come up with proof of identity, and also proof of identity, proof of personhood, and proof of researcher with specific training that is needed for access to a particular data set. Yeah, so that would be a really good place to look and see what they're doing.
How would this work with something like login.gov?
Yeah, and so that's a really good question. And the answer is it provides a similar service to what login.gov does. So we would see us as basically, I guess we would say, competing in a way with login.gov. We are thinking that right now at this point in time that some people might not want to use a service where the federal government is collecting yet more personal information about me. And VeriMe takes that collection of personal data away from a government entity and puts it in the hand of a co-op that is run by the people that are using the service. So that's how we see we have an advantage over login.gov. The other thing with login.gov is that it only works inside the US. VeriMe is an international solution, so you can verify your identity in one place, in one account, and use this around the world. So we see it as I think we have two big advantages over login.gov. Yeah.
And a somewhat different purpose in the sense that much of the activity around login.gov is not really research or product production. So it's just more authentication.
It's authentication, and I think it's also, I mean, login.gov is used for, like, I was applied with a colleague for an SBIR a while back, and you have to go through login.gov to apply for a grant. You have to go through login.gov to do peer review on government grants, all kinds of things, right? So it's still related to, and could be, those kinds of services could be provided by VeriMe. And there might be some future time when login.gov would say, hey, log in with your VeriMe credentials or something. So the government doesn't have to collect your information. And I know back in the initial days of OrcID, there was a lot of consternation on the side of the feds in even collecting that information. They didn't want to do it. They really were not happy about collecting PII at all. And so there may be an opportunity for VeriMe to say, hey, let's take that off your hands. We can provide you with this credential of proof of I am who I say I am. And then the government would have, less burden on the PII side of things.
And this might be especially important for the states and local governments that really don't have the capacity to deal with these things.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think when you're looking at, like, our third-party provider for identity verification services, the amount of work that they have gone through, oh my gosh, to get the various credentials for GDPR and UK and the SOC compliance, all of those compliance regimes, there's, like, I think 6 or 8 of them that they've gone through. That's a huge amount of work to get there. So having every single service that is requesting proof of identity it's an overload of work on the part of those things. And plus it then becomes an overload on the individual having to provide those private documents everywhere, and just a massive security problem. So yeah, we're trying to help with capacity and also really improve or I guess decrease the amount of times that an individual has to provide those personal documents to places that really shouldn't be asking for them. You shouldn't have to provide all that all the time. Being able to provide that credential should be enough. So yeah, you're right. The local and state governments would be helpful. This would be helpful for them.
Who is the third party identity?
Yeah, we're using SumSub right now. And we're looking at over time increasing the number of different providers that we're working with, just so you have a choice as an individual, which one do I want to go with. But that was the one that had, in our opinion, the best compliance certification, and they also provide worldwide service. And a number of the other ones that you might have heard the names of do not provide worldwide service. So we're looking for some entity that would be able to provide document verification in over 150 countries. This does it in close to 200, and they also provide language-based services both for the interface as well as for user documentation. So that made us, we're like, okay, this will be accessible in a way that we would like it to be accessible. And they've been around for I think 15 years now and are continuing to improve their services. So we decided to go with them.
What is it called again? Sorry.
SumSub.
I missed it. Can you put it in the chat?
Yeah.
Also, and I know you had a question in chat where you said, I'm not thinking of VeriMe as front-loaded. What is that? Like, what was that?
I was just thinking about research work. So you look at what's out there, you formulate a question, you figure out how to collect more information to answer that question, and then you share the outcome. And OrcID has always struck me as starting at that end point where you're sharing. which makes sense. It's where we really need better back then, especially really needed better metadata. But it doesn't really address the more upfront, I need access to information part.
I see what you mean. Yep. I think you're right. Yeah, once you have a thing, you can add metadata to the thing. But when you want to thinking about creating the thing and you need access to materials, resources, etc., this becomes your key in to gain access to that thing. I think it's a really great way to say that. Yeah, I like that. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, Anne, you asked the use cases beyond research. Yeah, membership verification. Again, we are really honed in on the research use case with researchers as our members. There are many other ways that identity credentials can be used and are used. One of them is, you've talked about DAOs before. Most DAOs are trustless, but you could also imagine having a DAO with identity verification, maybe if a DAO wanted to go that way, where it was a trustful DAO where you knew who the members were. But yeah, membership verification, that's another thing, again, being a co-op, is you have to know who everyone is, right? Because you have to have a roll of everyone who's eligible to vote. And so it's really interesting how the governance aspects of this feed into the technical aspects of the build of the platform itself, and not just the back end. It's been a really it's actually been really fun for me to kind of rethink, because I'm so used to working in nonprofit organizations, to rethink, okay, governance really is interleaved into our offering. And we have to be mindful of both the information we're collecting, not just for privacy and security reasons, but also because we have to manage and live by our co-op principles, right? So how do we make sure that these two pieces are informing each other? It's been really marvelous. I'm so glad we decided to go the co-op route. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of steps along the way. And yesterday I was talking with accountants. I'm like, I don't know how to do co-op accounting. Help me out, and new things that we're learning all along the way. But it's, I think it's the right thing to do, is to ensure that governance isn't just this tacked on thing, a board, that governance is inherent in the way that your product is being built. It's really cool. So,
yep. There are resources for people getting into this for the first time. I always say start with your cooperative extension office. They will give you all the handouts. And then you can go from handouts to directories for accounting and bookkeeping services, to legal recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. Some cooperative extension offices or state co-op offices, there's not very many states with those, but there's some, actually will not just give you a handout, but they'll also give you directory information that they verify.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I've gotten in touch. We incorporated in Colorado because they have a really great Colorado, right? But none of us are based in Colorado, and so I live in Wisconsin, and there's a great co-op extension in Wisconsin.
Yes.
So I'm hooked into them, and I just signed up yesterday for the U.S. The U.S. Co-op Workers Association. There's not quite the name of it, but yeah, I just signed up yesterday. I think that one of the other challenges with this, when you're building, and I'm looking at the time, but just the last little shot here, the piece that we're working on now is fundraising, right? And fundraising for a nonprofit, I know how to do that, right? I'm not always successful, but I know how to do it. And when you're talking to philanthropics, they get it. You're a nonprofit. Okay. Either like or don't like what you do, but I'm not going to question you about your governance because I get it. You're a nonprofit. And if you're a full corporate, you go after angel funding or venture capital or whatever it is, right? And there's an equity stake and all that. You get it. There's a whole pathway. But for the particular community that we're in, the research community, folks are not that familiar with co-ops. And so when you're doing fundraising, there's a whole other piece that you have to kind of get people familiar with, so that they understand, oh, you're a co-op. That sounds very strange. I don't think I give money to you, to get them on board with both the mission, vision, the platform, but also the governance structure and how funding can be provided into these structures and how they can get their money back out at the end of it, right? So that's another piece that, I think scares a lot of places away from doing a co-op, because like, we have to raise money to get this thing off the ground. And if I can't raise money because we're a quote unquote weird co-op, then I don't want to do the co-op thing. So I think that's the part.
There's help. There is help. There's a whole silver tsunami coalition building now, which for exactly this reason is because people all need to be able to do this at scale. They need to fundraise at scale, make transitions at scale, scale, everything scale.
Yeah.
So I think I'm happy to chat more if anyone is interested in connecting with a still not well publicized and somewhat nascent community around scaling all this. There's lots and lots of resources out there. They're not as well connected as they should be.
That's awesome. So Anne, I'll reach out to you somehow. I don't know if I have, I guess
Metagov.
Metagov. I'll reach out to you through Metagov. That'd be awesome. Yeah, just to understand it. Because I think part of it is, yes, getting VeriMe off the ground, but I'm hoping that by doing what we're doing, that we provide an example and kind of oh, it's already working for this group, that other people will be more likely to choose the co-op route. I really see us as a dual purpose in what we're doing. So yeah, there we go. Yeah, I saw they considered capital. That's awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Val.
Yeah, I probably have more as well. So I'm happy
You
to
should maybe
share.
chat with me at the end of this. There's so much good stuff in here. Well, we're at time. I just wanted to thank you guys for a really great conversation, some really fabulous questions, and realize there's a couple more things I need to get handy in my slides so that you guys can see them. And anything else that comes up, you can reach me through the Metagov Slack. Just happy to hear your ideas. And Val, the awesome thing is, if folks were interested, we could open up the platform a little bit early, not this week, but for people who are interested to try out the functionality and provide some feedback to us. That would be really awesome.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we can definitely talk and set something up, and yeah, I'm really excited about this. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. You have a fabulous rest of the day. Thanks for.
Yes, you too. Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye.
Proposed seminars.